So guys, do you know how much the Artemis program cost? If you know the real value, you guys will be shocked. To know the answer to it, stay tuned till the end. NASA's newest lunar exploration program, Artemis, will send the first woman and the first person of color to the moon. NASA will utilize cutting-edge technology through the Artemis missions to study the moon in new and improved ways and get ready for manned expeditions to Mars. The Apollo program was the name given to the initial lunar mission. John F. Kennedy issued a challenge to the country in 1961, put astronauts on the moon by the end of the decade. To know more about NASA's Artemis program, continue to our channel, Fly Me to the Moon. Make sure you've subscribed to our channel and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever a new video is posted. With the Apollo mission, NASA overcame the difficulty by putting the first person on the moon on July 20th, 1969. That program carries the name Apollo, a figure from Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, Artemis, the goddess of the moon, was Apollo's identical twin sister. The south pole of the moon is where the Artemis astronauts will stand when they touch down. The Space Launch System is a new rocket from NASA, SLS. It is the most potent rocket that the world has ever seen. Up to 4 people will travel in the Orion spacecraft as it is launched by SLS into lunar orbit. Then, astronauts will dock Orion with the Gateway, a tiny spacecraft. Astronauts will train here in order to embark on missions to the moon and beyond. In a brand new human landing mechanism, the crew will go from the Gateway to the lunar surface, then return to the Gateway. The crew will return to Earth on Orion after their work is done. Despite the fact that the Artemis program was officially launched in 2017 during the Trump administration, many of its components, including the Orion spacecraft, were created during the earlier Constellation program, 2005 to 2010, under the Bush administration, and after it was canceled during the Obama administration. The Space Launch System's inaugural flight, featuring the launch of Orion, was originally planned for 2016, but was postponed and carried mannequins and robots on Artemis 1 mission, which launched on November 16, 2022. A good site to pick up fresh scientific knowledge is the moon. NASA will find out more knowledge about the moon, Earth, and possibly the sun when astronauts explore new areas of the lunar surface. Mars uses the moon as a test bed. A testbed is a location to demonstrate the viability of a technology or concept. The moon serves as a testbed for humans' ability to spend extended amounts of time working away from Earth on Mars in the future. NASA had to create new technology in order to launch the first moon missions. Many of those technologies have been transformed into things that people use on Earth every day. For the Artemis missions, NASA is collaborating with industries and companies to develop new technology. Nearly 50 years after the last expedition to the moon, NASA launched its Artemis 1 mission early on Wednesday from a launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. At 1:47 a.m. EST, the flight took off. Only 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 2 solid rocket boosters on the Space Launch System detached from the COA rocket in a full view of hundreds of onlookers gathering on the ground miles from the launch site. After 2 scrubs, it was the third attempt to launch the rocket. The first attempt was on August 29th. After the launch's deafening boom and blinding flare illuminated Florida's eastern shore, NASA engineers cheered. A brief video of the launch was tweeted by NASA. 4 solar panels were deployed 24 minutes into the journey as the spacecraft was orbiting the Earth at a speed of 16,000 miles per hour. 15,000 solar panels in each of the solar arrays power the spaceship in its retrograde orbit around the moon. At 3:15 a.m., a translunar injection burn lasting 18 minutes took place. EST, sending the craft on a course to the moon at a peak speed of 22,000 miles per hour. Following that move, 10 tiny CubeSats were launched to collect data for various deep space science missions. On Sunday, December 11th, the Orion spacecraft is scheduled to splash down in the Pacific. Orion will orbit the moon and travel 80 miles above its surface before making a return to Earth. In order to study the possibility of frozen water there, scientists are looking into a future landing close to the south pole of the moon. Future missions to Mars will require access to water. While Mars is the distant goal of the Artemis missions, the first crewed flight of the spacecraft will take place as early as 2024, and the first woman and person of color will touch down on the moon on the second crewed mission as early as 2025. The project's initial estimated cost of $4.1 billion per flight has drawn the attention of critics. Without considering the unanticipated economic rewards that would undoubtedly come, they frequently stop there. Joseph Acaba, Kayla Barron, Raja Shari, Matthew Dominic, Victor Glover, Warren Hoberg, Johnny Kim, Christina H. Koch, Kjell Lindgren, Nicole A. Mann, Anne McLean, Jessica Meyer, Scott Tingle, Jessica Watkins, and Stephanie Wilson are the 18 US astronauts who will travel to the moon. The debut of the new space launch system is Artemis 1. As NASA puts it, this is a big lift vehicle. It is the most powerful rocket engine ever launched into orbit, much more powerful than the Saturn V system used by Apollo in the 1960s and 1970s to send people to the moon. It is a novel kind of rocket system since it features two strap-on solid rocket boosters taken from the space shuttle, in addition to two primary engines made of mixtures of liquid oxygen and hydrogen. It's actually a cross between the Saturn V rocket from Apollo and the space shuttle. Testing is crucial since the Orion crew capsule will be put through a lot of stress. It will spend a month in the highly radioactive space environment of the moon. Most crucially, when it returns to Earth at 25,000 miles per hour, it will test the heat barrier that shields the capsule and its passengers. The heat shield must work properly, because this will be the fastest capsule re-entry since Apollo. A number of tiny satellites that will be placed around a lunar orbit are also carried by this mission. These will carry out some helpful preliminary science, including investigations into the prematurely shadowed craters where water is believed to exist, as well as more assessments of the radiation environment to determine the long-term impacts on people. The mission serves as a precursor to Artemis 3, which will bring the first manned lunar missions of the 21st century, and the first since 1972. A test flight without crew is Artemis 1. Astronauts will be on board Artemis 2, which will launch a few years after that. It will also be an orbital mission, similar to Apollo 8, which circled the moon and returned to Earth. The astronauts will orbit the moon for a longer period of time and test everything with a human crew. Finally, that will result in a trip to the moon's surface, during which Artemis 3 will eventually meet up with the SpaceX Starship and transfer crew. The lunar Starship will transport the crew out to the surface, while Orion stays in orbit. They will travel to the south pole of the moon to examine a region that has never been studied by scientists in order to look for the water ice there. Since Vice President Mike Pence instructed NASA to send people back to the moon by 2024, the space agency has made significant advancements in the direction. Under the direction of Administrator Jim Bridenstine, the organization has awarded contracts for both the components of the Lunar Gateway, a model space station that will travel in far-off orbit around the moon. Additionally, NASA has started asking businesses for suggestions on their plans for a 3-stage lunar lander, on which work may start in 2020. The agency is also requesting freight delivery to the moon. These are significant steps, and it might be challenging to get a massive organization like NASA to move rapidly. But, above all this, there are dark clouds in the distance. The issue of funding the Artemis program to put humans on the moon is the most obvious one. Neither the US House nor the Senate has yet to draft a budget for the upcoming fiscal year 2020. If there isn't more money, NASA won't be able to provide the industry with the money to travel and perform work. However, there is yet another issue, which University of Notre Dame's lunar scientist Clive Neal brought out during Tuesday's National Space Council meeting, to name just one. NASA runs the very real possibility of repeating the Apollo program with the Artemis program, a flags and footprint race to the moon with no commitment to a lunar base or a long-term presence in space. The truth is that, even with a substantial budget boost, NASA can hardly fund a lunar landing mission in the 2020s, at least if it wants to use its Space Launch System rocket and standard operating procedures, as it seems determined to do. This is more than enough for a space organization that has gone 47 years without sending a person into deep space. That's all for today. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel, Fly Me to the Moon, for more interesting videos like this. Check out other exciting videos on our channel. See you next.